Today we're going to be testing the CCRGEVB, which is a constant current regulator array evaluation board from On Semiconductor. The equipment we'll be using today include a DC power supply set to 15 volts DC, connected between our power 1 and power 2 pins on the board. We'll also be using a voltmeter connected between test points 4 and test point 7 on the board to measure the voltage across R3. The voltage measured across R3 will be used to calculate the current, as the value of R3 is 1 ohm. Before beginning the test, we want to ensure that all jumpers are disconnected from the board. Then we're going to begin by connecting jumpers J1, J4, J5, J6, and J9 to the board. Then to begin the test, we're going to power on our 15 volt DC power supply and flick our on switch on to power on diode D5. And then we want to check to see that our voltage, which is going to be used to measure current across R3, is between 17 and 25 milliamps, which in this case it's 20 milliamps. Then we're going to power off the board and remove jumper J4. We always want to ensure to power off the switch anytime we're changing the jumpers. And then we're going to power on the board once again after jumper J4 has been removed and ensure that all diodes D5, D6, and D7 are powered on. And our current across resistor R3 is between 16 and 24 milliamps, which in this case it is 19 milliamps. Then we're going to power off the board, remove jumper J1, and move it to the position of jumper J2. And once again we're going to power on the board, checking to see that our current across R3 is between 24 and 36 milliamps, which in this case it is around 30 milliamps. Then we're going to power off our board once more, removing jumper J2 and moving the jumper to the position of jumper J3. Powering the board on once again and checking that current this time is between 22 and 34 milliamps, which in this case it's 28 milliamps. Once again we're going to power off our board and we're going to add an additional jumper back onto jumper J2. And we're going to power on the board again and check to see that our current now is between 46 and 68 milliamps, which in our case it's 57 milliamps. And we want to power off of the board and remove all jumpers. Now that we've tested the low current LEDs, we're going to move on to test the medium current LEDs. Once again, we want to begin by removing all jumpers. And then we want to add jumpers J7, J9, J10 and 11, and J12 to the board. Now we want to power on the board once more and ensure that only LED D8 is on. And we want to check to see that our current across R3 is between 26 and 40 milliamps, which in our case it is 34 milliamps. Then we want to power off our switch and remove jumper J11, which will light all 3 diodes. And we want to check to see that our current now is between 24 and 36 milliamps, which in our case, it's 31 milliamps. Then we want to power off the board once more and place a jumper across jumper 8. And we want to power on the board once more and check that our current now is between 43 and 65 milliamps. Which in our case it is 57 milliamps, which is appropriate. Then we want to power off the board once more and once again remove all jumpers from the board. Now to test the high current LEDs, we want to again begin by removing all jumpers and then adding on jumpers J9, J13 and J14, J16, and jumper J17. Now we're going to power on our board and check to see that only diode D11 turns on. And we want to check to see that our current across R3 is between 82 and 122 milliamps, which in our case it is 102 milliamps. Then we want to power off the board in order to remove jumper J17, which will effectively power on all 3 diodes in the high current range. We want to ensure that our measured current is between 75 and 113 milliamps, which in our case it is 92 milliamps, which is appropriate. Now we want to power off our board and add on jumper J15. Powering this on should change our measured current to between 112 and 168 milliamps, which in our case it is 138 milliamps, which is appropriate. Now we want to power off our board and remove jumpers J13, J14, and J15. Place a jumper on J18. And power on the board to check to see that our current is between 258 and 386 milliamps, which in our case it's 338 milliamps, which is appropriate. Then we want to power off our board, removing jumper J18 and placing a jumper on jumper J19. Now our current should be between 113 and 169 milliamps, which in our case, it's 144 milliamps. Once again, we want to power off the board and place a jumper on jumper pin 21. And power on the board, which should change our current between 281 and 421 milliamps, which in this case is 375 milliamps. And lastly, we want to add a jumper onto jumper point 18. Which should change our current to between 502 and 752 milliamps, which in our case it is 676 milliamps. And once again, power the board off and remove all jumpers. This concludes the test of the CCRGEVB. For more information, please visit www.onsemi.com or contact an authorized distributor.